Welcome to gaLtalk, a new show for women with an emphasis on discussing the cares and concerns of life from the perspective of women of color. gaLtalk is not just talk. GAL is an acronym for Get a Life. That's life with a capital L, as in life in Jesus. We're not just here to talk, but to share with you wisdom you can trust. Now, what we will say will sound like it's countercultural at times, because it is. God's wisdom is often opposite of what we want to do. It's the hard thing to do a lot of times, but it's the thing that will bring us peace and contentment that other advice will not give us. Join us on this countercultural journey.
Hello, Galaxy. I am Angelica Jackson, your host, and I am back with another fun fact. Did you know that April has been recognized as Stress Awareness Month since 1992? That's only a couple years older than some of you who are listening, and I know it's only 5 years older than me, which is crazy. But in recognition of this holiday and increased stress levels across the world, stress is going to be this month's podcast topic. I recently read a statistic that said more than 75% of US adults reported experiencing stress and its symptoms. That was from an American Psychological Association study in 2019. Since then, we've experienced COVID, wars, an election cycle, and just so much more. So to discuss this topic, our very special guest is Dr. Michelle Woody. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, sure. Thanks, Angelica. I am Dr. Michelle Woody. I am a professor of counseling at Dallas Theological Seminary. I used to work in Texas, but now I work for the seminary in Washington, D.C. at our extension here. I am a licensed professional counselor, and I'm licensed in both Texas and also in D.C. So I'm happy to be with you today and happy to talk to you about a subject that is near and dear to a lot of us.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and dive in with the first question.
Okay.
It seems like we are experiencing stress at a new level. Is stress a new epidemic or something humans have always struggled with?
So I have to tell you, I think that is a really good question that you've asked. And why do I think that? For the very reasons that you talked about. Stress has been with us and been with people throughout the years, depending on race, depending on geography, depending on backgrounds of people, economic struggles, all of that has been a part of stress. However, our new level of stress has come from the pandemic. And just like you quoted the APA, or the American Psychological Association, certainly being a therapist, I spend a lot of time reading articles there and also with them, and also just understanding more about what's happening to us as people. And I want to say, no matter who you are, no matter how you think you've had it all together, no matter being a young person, an older person, and everybody in between, we have all been impacted by this literal global timeout in the world. The whole world has been shut down. And if you just take a little time to look at either your device or the news, people will see that there are countries right now who are struggling with how do we control our lives and make them better during the pandemic. Fear of the unknown has caused so many, as we think about that statistic that you mentioned, 3/4 of the people who took the survey to feel stressed.
I think that's such a great answer. But it also led me to another question that wasn't on our list.
Oh, sure.
So, along with the pandemic, a lot of people have been talking about burnout.
Yeah.
So what is the difference between burnout and just an extreme level of stress?
Okay, another good question. So let me give you just a definition, a clinical definition that the World Health Organization has on stress. And maybe this will help those who are listening to kind of think through their own situation. The World Health Organization, or WHO, says that stress is the reaction people may have when presented with demands and pressures that don't match their knowledge and abilities. And as a result, it challenges their ability to cope.
Okay.
Okay. So if we think about the metaphor of running a marathon or being on a treadmill, you're just running to nowhere. You're trying to do the work. You're doing it differently. People, families who all of a sudden, instead of being, everybody have their schedule, no matter dysfunctional or not, going out the door every morning, you go to work and you go to school and you go where you're headed. Everybody was in the same spot, but not just for a short period of time, for an extended period of time.
Yeah, those 2 weeks they said we were going to be inside lasted a lot longer.
Joke, 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 right? 2 weeks. Okay, good. I get to rest and talk to my students from this dining room rather than driving in the car and going to school, right? But all of a sudden, 2 weeks became 2 months, and 2 months became 6 months, and 6 months became over a year. That's too long. That's too long. And so now the fact that people had to readjust with no preparation, no experience in this at all, of being crammed together for this period of time, that's what led to being overwhelmed and being unable to cope. That's where people started to burn out. Now you have to, probably in a lot of households, and I know for a lot of my clients, moms started getting up 2 and 3 hours earlier just because the house was silent. They didn't have to worry about the pets, the kids, the husband, the food. They could just be still. But the only problem is they had to go all day. And if they worked in the home too, it was a load. It was a load. And so when you think about, again, the stressors are, and we're talking about the negative parts of stress, but stress can be positive for people.
Really?
Sure. If people have a test and they have to, study for that test, they're motivated. They're way motivated. So now they may stay up a lot longer than they had planned to, so that they can work on studying for that exam. Somebody, I just watched a lot of basketball. I went to big schools for college, and so I'm watching March Madness, or a lot of it.
Yes, rock chalk.
There you go. Yay. So there you have it. A lot of people now would say that was stress on steroids. Last second, and now you have to shoot the winning score. Stress. A lot of stress. You have to shoot the winning free throw. A lot of stress, but that can work to a benefit if you are, if you're running away from something dangerous. Positive stress. It's the negative, though, that we know impacts health. We know that it changes behaviors. I'd like to talk about one of the behaviors that's impacted by stress: overeating.
Oh, yes.
And I'll just self-disclose. Once I got home, and had to teach from home, it was every time I walked past my refrigerator, okay, I just had to take a little look, see what was in there. Just
get a little snack.
Have a little something. Okay, so now I have evicted my friend, the refrigerator, and have now gone back to fine, diet, exercise, eat when hungry, not when passing by the refrigerator. That had to end. That's over. So
the COVID-15 was real.
COVID-15 is real, and I got to tell you, that's over. That had to end. So that's the kind of thing, that people are impacted by. And I really, like I said, I feel for people during these inflationary times of having all your kids at home, and I'm glad it's more somewhat normal. We're never going back to the way we were. And that's another thing we can talk about later if you'd like. But, somewhat normal. So kids aren't all there eating all day. That really impacted and put a strain on budgets at home. Just people weren't
leading to more stress.
Yes, more stress.
Mm.
Yes.
Well, I'm so glad that you mentioned stress can actually be positive. I think, a lot of times we focus on how negative it is and all the negative effects. But
Yep.
I think that's something that everybody who's listening needs to take from this episode, is that sometimes stress can be positive.
Yes.
It's all about balance.
Yes. Yes.
Everyone deals with it differently, which kind of leads us into our next question. Have you noticed the difference between how Christians manage stress and how unbelievers do, and how it affects their lives?
Okay. So, all right. So, kind of a loaded question. I want to be careful here.
Yes.
And I want us to think about it. If you've looked at recent attacks on airplanes, I don't think we've ever had a period where people have been fighting staff on an airplane or other passengers.
Mm-hmm.
If we think about what's happening in our malls, if we think about what's happening in the markets, if we think about just the parking lot and just one little parking spot, people go
the road
from
rage
0 to 10 with road rage instantly. I think all we can say is both Christians and non-Christians alike have been subject to that.
Mm-hmm.
And when we know that as people of faith, we have our prayer lives, we have our fellowship with other believers, we have Bible studies, we have a lot of things that ground us. There's no question about that. But we also have the harsh reality of natural disasters. In fact, I was in class with students from my Dallas students about probably 2 weeks ago, and the sirens were going off for tornado watches. Okay, we're not immune from natural disasters. We're not immune from the COVID virus or even the fear of getting COVID. That was something new for some people, and even younger people who aren't even thinking about, my life could be over in another day or two. People really weren't thinking like that, but now all of a sudden, the virus and the pandemic made it far clearer that any day could be the last day. And so I want to say that Christians and non-Christians, I believe, were kind of in the same bucket. The interesting thing is, as we started to ease relate the regulations and as the vaccines came out and they were more present for everybody to take, it seems that some people, sort of non-believers, were more risk averse. Our Christians were more risk averse, still staying inside, still not going out, still, even if their church opened, not going to their church. On the other hand, non-believers, they really kind of had the Lord's view in John 10:10. He said that the enemy came to kill, steal, and destroy, but that he came so that we would have life and have it more abundantly. Okay, well, seems to me it appeared that non-believers were living life abundantly. Green light, let's go back outside. Let's go back to the bars. Let's go back out on vacation. Let's do the things. And I'm not saying Christians didn't. I'm just saying it appeared that other people were like, oh, well, let's do this. Let's get out. And so I think that to me, that was somewhat surprising that those who probably should have been fearful weren't, and those who probably should not have been fearful were.
That makes sense.
Kind of interesting. Just kind of interesting.
It is really interesting because I kind of wonder if some of that has to do with the age divide amongst believers, because I know a lot of people were mad at everybody who went to Passion, which is a young adult event, just because they were in there and it was millions of them with no masks, and some of them were catching COVID. And also just all of the messaging during COVID seemed like they were trying to get young people to stay inside, and a lot of college students were still, gathering and throwing parties and stuff like that. So maybe age contributes to some of that. I don't know.
You're right. And a lot of Well, I would say that in a lot of households, it is in some ways a lot of those who are younger who have more or less gotten those who are older out of the house.
Hmm.
But it was the concern of, the way that the CDC talks about the virus and, oh, if you're over a certain age, oh, you got to get now the new booster. I mean,
Yes.
where are we headed with this? That's the question. That's the question. So I say that for everyone, you have to not just pray, but you have to certainly be cautious because now we have the new set of variants that
Hmm.
are here. And let's not say they're coming, they're here. So everybody has to take precautions. But I think too that we've got to live, got to live, have to live life to the fullest because if for no other reason, Easter shows us, Resurrection Sunday shows us that Jesus expects us to live. We've
Amen.
got to live.
So as we're living, as we're living, a lot of us try to ignore stress
Uh-huh.
because we're like, okay, well, I'm trying to live life to the fullest. I don't have time to worry about that. I'm going to put that on the back burner. I'm not going to let it ruin my day or ruin my week or my life. But there's consequences to that. So
Mhm.
what are some of the consequences of us ignoring our stressors?
Okay. Another good question. You're asking a ton of them today. Um, there's a psychiatrist. His name is Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. And he wrote a book a few years ago entitled The Body Keeps the Score.
The body
Okay.
keeps the score. Okay.
In the book, he talks about how even those who have mild cases, it's really a book more about trauma, but I would argue that we've all experienced trauma within the last few years of the pandemic. But even if it's a mild case, what he says is that the signs of stress, even if you don't feel them initially, will eventually be present in your lives. They will make themselves known. How will they make themselves known? Headaches that you may not have ever had, you'll start to have headaches. Stomach aches that you've never had, you might start to have those type ailments. Muscle tension in your neck, in your shoulders, anxiety of some type.
Oh, yes.
I know, even injuries. For those who like to work out, there are these new gyms here that, I mean, I just see everybody's just flying. We're working out, we're sweating and all that. But injuries, little nagging injuries that start to pop up, that's because of the stress. Those are the consequences. And one of the things that I'm doing in training now and training the counseling students to be aware of is asking clients, where in your body do you feel something that you haven't felt before?
That's a good question.
Yes, yes. And, how is your breathing? Do you have muscle tension? Are you irritable or angry for no reason?
Hmm.
That person who just got your one parking spot, like you're the only person in the mall parking lot or the market parking lot. You're not the only one. And I'm not minimizing it and I'm not trying to, but what I'm saying is everybody have to just notice for themselves. How are you doing in certain areas of your life? How does what shouldn't, be that big of a deal all of a sudden cause you to feel things that you haven't felt before? Be aware. Just start to be aware of it. And I think now, or once you start to be aware of it now, that's the first part. But the second part is, okay, what can I do about it? And we've suppressed a lot of things, or at least a lot of people have suppressed things during COVID,
Yes.
right? People who like to, from a younger person's perspective, are from, my students and others, church members, my daughters and other family members, single, people like to date. They want to go out. They want to have fellowship. Well, that's kind of hard to do right now. And you don't want to go out with somebody and say, can I see your vaccination card?
Yes.
You don't want to say something like, have you, I'd like to give you this rapid test before we go out, before I get in your car with you.
You have to do the survey they give you at the doctor's office. In the last 10 days, have you left the country? Have you experienced shortness of breath? Imagine your date receiving that.
Yeah, and what about that cute little gizmo now for taking people's temperature? You just hold it.
You shoot them from across the room. You're like, oh, we can't meet. I can't come to your table. You have a fever.
I'm telling you, think about it. That's kind of where we are right now. And that makes it hard. That really makes it hard.
Definitely.
And then on the other hand, you see football stadiums, especially in Texas, every football game we saw last fall, 100,000 people easily in the stadium. High schoolers equally as large. That's kind of what we've seen. And so now the question is it a super spreader event? You have parents that are in bad position. What are the kids saying? Everybody's going. Well, you're not going because you live here with grandma, and I don't want grandma exposed to COVID. We can't get a vaccine for grandma, so you can't go. Now there's tension. Now there's what?
More stress.
That's good. So, and so I think even understanding what it is that we're dealing with, and if people would be more honest rather than trying to grit and bear it and hunker down and do it, let's talk about what's bugging us. That's what I like to do. When I do groups with teens, I always say, what's bothering you? What's making you mad? Tell me what's making you mad today. And so if more people would say, I'm mad because of, and then just start talking about what makes them mad. I'm mad about whatever. That's a release. Just speaking it makes it now more in your control than it once was. And even if there's no real solution at the time, there's more, agency over it. And the person doesn't feel as trapped or as, hopeless in it. That's what we want to avoid. We want to avoid people feeling hopeless. And I'm concerned about the high level of those who are choosing suicide to end their lives. I'm concerned about, sexual orientation issues surfacing and manifesting because of the last couple of years. And some of the things we can argue, a lot of things have already been there, but the last 2 years turned it over on its ear and made it more of an issue.
Okay. So you spoke a little bit about how one of the first steps we should take when we're dealing with stress is to just go ahead and talk about it and to vent. But I've heard a lot of people, especially some of my male friends, who believe that they shouldn't have to talk about their stress. It's something that they should deal with internally, and they're just going to go work out or go to the gym and play some hoops, and that is supposed to relieve them of the stress that they're feeling. Do you think that is what's the word I'm looking for? Do you think that is a good outlet for stress? How does it compare to go ahead and venting? And what are some other things that people can do if they feel like they don't have someone to vent to, or that's just not their thing?
Okay, all right. I think let's first address the issue of, can you just work it out? Can you exercise the stress out? Physically, you can exercise the stress out.
Okay.
The endorphins that come from that can literally turn that negative stress into a positive so that the body relaxes.
So no more neck pain, no more like tense in your shoulders. Okay.
Yes. The body feels like, I'm good now. I'm better now. Okay, I can handle it. That's not the way to handle the psychological issues. The way to handle the psychological issues, and I dare say, is to go forth and talk with someone. It doesn't have to be a therapist, but I'm recommending that at this particular time, a lot of people need to talk to a therapist. How do you know if you need to talk to a therapist? Because I think for too long, going to therapy has been a badge of shame. It has a negative connotation in so many circles and with so many cultures. People feel like I should be able to handle this. And in fact, you have so many Christians. It's only been recent years, not just because of the pandemic, but recent years where Christians have said, I guess I need to go and talk with someone, because before it was viewed that you don't have enough faith if you have to go to see a therapist. You're not praying well enough, or hard enough, or deeply enough if you have to go to a therapist. So that's probably that's new. But in times of stress, what I would say is that in admitting it, in talking about I'm overwhelmed with certain things, in talking about I'm just sad, I have to grieve that, I'm in my late 20s, I'm in my mid 30s. I just wanted, by now, I expected that I would be dating. I expected I would be with someone. I was expecting and have somebody fill in the blank. But that negative feeling, whatever it might be, doesn't have to be anger, doesn't have to be something dangerous, but it could be something that leaves someone on the verge of tears, leaves someone at the point where they can't sleep well. And so, okay, now since the refrigerator's there, the TV's on, and you're there, and it's late at night, well, okay, if I eat a little something, maybe I'll feel better. Well, maybe you won't. And maybe it's better to talk to a therapist. So I think that it really is something that I needed to say. The cliche is self-care. We've all heard it so much, we're numb to even the phrase self-care. But I would argue that it's a cliche that is a useful one. Diet, exercise, and rest. Everybody should lead with that. Diet, am I eating well? Am I exercising at least some? And am I resting properly? And then everybody needs a spiritual and emotional reset. Everybody. Why? Because we've all been thrown. We've been thrown mentally. And I don't want to go too deeply into it, but we think about the left and right brain. The left brain is the one that is for your executive function, the logical decision-making side. When one is overly stressed because of, say, trauma or something like a trauma, that part shuts down. And that leaves the creative part and the side that just wants to perhaps impulsively do something to doing something, but it may not be the right thing.
Right.
So we have to guard against that side and just racing ahead. We want our brains to be integrated so that we can live well. At work-life balance allows us to have both sides of our brain working well. And I dare say, we know prayer and relationship with God is the best foundation. That's the firm foundation that we have. No question about that. But if that doesn't work for everybody, there are other things. You can do poetry. You can have retreats. You can do spas. You can now safely venture out with family and friends. You can now start to do different exercises, and people need to think about being new. Just be new. Don't do the same things. Be new.
Now is the perfect time to pick up some new habits, to try out some new things. That's perfect.
Yes. So that's what I would recommend.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for all of your insight. I really enjoyed recording this episode. I think it's so important just because of all the reasons we already stated.
Great. Well, I have really enjoyed it. And, I would just say the last thing that I would say to everybody is take a moment. When you need a moment, take a moment.
Mhm.
What does it mean to take a moment? Take a moment to do whatever it is that gives you peace, tranquility, and a future hope rather than despair based on what's happening in the present.
Focus on something different.
Yes, take a moment. Don't be so in a hurry to rush and to run and to check the boxes and gotta do it. Here's a deadline.
Mhm.
Take a moment to breathe. Take a moment to look around at God's creation. And you're thinking, what? Do what? Yeah. Look and see the newness, the flowers blooming. If you don't have any, just go to Trader Joe's. They have a lot of flowers. They did a lot of new, just go look. But you know, it's beautiful. And you just may want to take some home.
I love that. Take a moment. When Minji edits the episode, I hope that she titles it "Take a Moment." I love that.
Oh, I'm
It's a
glad.
breath of fresh air.
I'm glad. I'm glad. Good to be with you.
Thank you. Until next time, Galaxy.